The bell sounded like a door closing somewhere else. It always did, at the end of the day, gentle, apologetic, as if the building were asking permission to breathe. Chairs scraped back. A tide of laughter rolled into the corridor and broke against backpacks and elbows. Jamie Miller stacked his books big at the bottom, small at the top. Corners lined because Miss Pratt said routine was a bridge when the floor went loose. "Jamie," she said from the doorway, half question, half reminder. "Reception need a signature for Monday." He nodded. Nodding was easier than words. He slid the strap of his bag over his shoulder, the weight sitting in the same place as yesterday, and walked the edge of the corridor with his shoulder near the wall, reading the displays without reading them. On a charity poster, someone had scrawled "killer" in block letters and blotted a black bar over the eyes of a smiling boy. You didn't need to know Callum to know his absence. It had weather, moved through rooms, made teachers speak softer. At reception, Mrs. Garrison pushed a clipboard toward him. Just their love. Her smile was the kind people use for kids who cry easily. Jamie printed "Mia la la" inside the boxes, careful not to touch the lines. She said, "Dad rang, he'll be on time," and he nodded again because it's rude to argue with hope. The security guard was near the doors today, badge crooked, lanyard twisted. "All right, son," he said, voice like worn tires. Jamie counted the tiles, 8 big, 9 small at the threshold. The rubber lip under the mat, and then stepped into the cold, where buses sighed and a football thudded off a shin, and a girl laughed too high because boys were watching. No white fan. He checked the bus screen, 1519. He pulled his sleeves down until the cuffs touched his wrists and turned away from the low wall where smokers pretend not to smoke. "Oi" came clean through the air. Miller, Connor Lewis, had gravity the way some people have dimples. He didn't ask for attention. It arrived early and sat obedient. Hood up, though it wasn't raining, grin a sheet of ice. "Hear about Callum," he said in a tone that made the question a test. Everyone had. The assembly, the candles, the corridor space shaped like him. Jamie nodded. Nodding can mean anything. "Mad," Connor said, like the word was a crisp he didn't like. "Weird how some people are they been treated. Teachers and that." He threw the last words like seeds, smiled at where they landed. "Leave it," said a quiet voice at Jamie's shoulder. The corridor space shaped like him. Jamie nodded. Nodding can mean anything. "Mad," Connor said, like the word was a crisp he didn't like. "Weird how some people are they been treated. Teachers and that." He threw the last words like seeds, smiled at where they landed. "Leave it," said a quiet voice at Jamie's shoulder. Lisa, cardigan sleeves pushed to elbows, ponytail that meant work. She had a way of making people move out of her way without touching them. "He's not part of your show." "Banter," Connor said. His eyes slid over Jamie like a hand checking pockets. "Keep your brother close, yeah?" Lisa didn't blink. She took Jamie's elbow, steered him to the crossing. "Don't look at him next time," she said, soft. "He's nothing you need." "Dad's late," Jamie said. "Dad's always late," she said, and they almost smiled. If you can say a thing like whether you can walk through it. They were 2 streets from home when the van finally arrived behind them. Dad lifted a hand apology folded into a wave into nothing. "Roadworks," he said, "which is true if you need it to be." "Nuggets for tea, noodles," Jamie said. Noodles meant order. Boil 5 minutes, drain, sauce in, stir 8 times. The steam smelled like last week when nothing had broken yet. The knock came through the house like a cough, late, sharp. Dad's voice went too loud in the hallway. Lisa's feet were fast on the stairs. Jamie hovered at the kitchen door until, Jamie, down a minute, mate. Two detectives in ordinary coats stood like furniture that doesn't fit. Jamie Miller, D.I. Con, D.S. Hargreaves. Badges flashed. Jamie knew enough telly to feel the air change. We'd like to ask a few questions, Khan said. Here, Lisa said. He's 13. Here is fine, Khan said. They sat at the small table with varnish peeling like sunrise on water. It's about Callum Price, he said, putting the name on the table, making space around it. Do you know him? Hargreaves asked, pen scratching quietly. He's in my class, Jamie said. He wanted to add, choose pens, good at football. Once said sorry when he knocked my books, but the word sorry had stuck in Callum's mouth that day and didn't make it out. Were you friends? Khan asked. No, he said, and smoothed it. He was okay. Did you speak to him after school yesterday? No. Khan opened a notebook. CCTV shows you leaving the back gate at 15:13. Callum leaves 20 seconds later. Everyone goes that way. Jamie said, the word small, that's where the bus is. Did you see Aiden Brooks? Hargreaves asked, watching him. Jamie blinked. Aiden. We detained him this evening, Con said, careful, like he was carrying a glass. We're asking his friends for context. Not Aiden, Jamie said, before he had a better sentence. He's kind. He pictured art club, Aiden with charcoal on his fingers, sleeves rolled back because the coat was second-hand and the right size for someone else. He pictured the dent, a pencil left in Aiden's finger, rubbed when he was thinking. He brings biscuits to the library and lines them up smallest to biggest. He returns books on time. He fainted in bio last week when Mr. Hobbs showed the lamb's heart. Khan's pen made an unambitious note. Did Aiden mention going to the canal? He said maybe, Jamie said. If the light was good, he draws the water. He says reflections make the world bigger than we see. Did he say who he'd meet? Hargreaves asked. He didn't. He doesn't really meet people there. He meets the water. He flushed. I mean, he draws alone. Con closed the notebook. Thank you. We'll need a formal statement tomorrow. Is he okay? Jamie asked. He's safe, Con said, which can mean anything. After they left, the house kept the shape of them. Dad said, tea, and meant hold on. Lisa called someone and said we need you and got a yes because her voice had that talent. Jamie went to his room, opened the tin with his rocks, arranged them into a river, made a bridge of two, and then took it away. He whispered, not Aiden, until the consonants wore smooth. Morning made the school smell like disinfectant and hand gel, and sleep not slept. Aiden's chair was empty in English. Miss Pratt moved carefully through Susan Hill, like every sentence might splinter. We hold him in our thoughts, she said. Someone snorted and someone else hissed shut up, then quiet as if a camera had turned. At break, Jamie's phone filled with the town. He was so normal, knew it, knew WHAT. Look at this, blurry photos by the canal, filtered to look certain, comments. It's always the quiet ones, a row of knives, a prayer hand, a heart. People are generous with fear online. They give it away free and charge for doubt. He put the phone face down. Someone touched his sleeve. Aiden's mum, red-rimmed, jaw tight, Highway's jacket from cleaning. Jamie, she said, voice fraying, you know him. Tell them how he is. Will you tell them? He nodded hard. She nodded back because the body likes to agree to something when it has nothing to hold. At the station, the room hummed like a fridge. The recorder clicked on. Bryony, the child psychologist, sat not opposite, but a little aside, hair tucked behind her ear like a thought you don't want to lose. If you need a minute, she said, say minute. Con pressed the red button gently. Name for the tape. Jamie Miller. You said Aiden sometimes goes to the canal, Khan began. Yesterday, he maybe. He said if the light was good, it was grey, but he might still. What time did you leave? Hargreaves asked. 3:13, Jamie said. Reception note, bus, walked. Dad was late. He didn't look at Lisa. He didn't need to. Did you see Aiden after school? I saw a coat like his by the gate, he said. But coats look like coats. Bryony smiled a little. What are you sure of? He drew our hands in art. Said mine looked like a map. He rubs the pencil dent when he's thinking. He doesn't like blood. Jamie glanced at Khan. He's kind, he said again, as if you could heap kindness on a table until it was heavy enough to be evidence. Khan's eyes were the stillness a stream has in winter. We recovered gloves from his locker, he said. Wool, dark. It's December, Lisa said. We're testing, Hargreaves said. He's left-handed, Jamie blurted. He always has charcoal on his left palm. Hargreaves' pen paused. Noted. Did he speak about Callum? Khan asked. He said it was wrong, Jamie said. He wished he could draw him not gone. Khan let the silence have the room for a moment. Thank you, Jamie. You've helped. Help him, Jamie said. The word a plea. Please. They let him out into an afternoon that smelled of frost and chips. 2 Year 11s sat on the wall sharing a vape, presiding over traffic. The world kept doing the rude thing of continuing. Inside a different room, Aiden sat with his hands inside his sleeves, shoulders folded to make bones smaller. A solicitor had told him to say no comment, and he had tried. But it hurt like holding your breath, so he had said I didn't, once in a voice that sounded like he didn't recognize himself. D.I. Con had watched his face for the tremor that says lie and found the tremor that says boy. Tell me about the canal, Con said. I draw there, Aiden said. The bits where straight things pretend not to be for a minute. Fences in water, bricks in water. Were you there at 4:30? Yes, he said. But not 4, not when he swallowed. Not for that. Why gloves? Hargreaves asked. So the charcoal doesn't go everywhere, Aiden said, baffled. Miss Cartwright says I turned the room grey. Anyone you saw? Khan asked. Mason, Aiden said, eyes flicking, with the keys. He opened the fire door so I could cut across. I know you're not supposed to, I said cheers. He was on his phone. He always is. He looked at the table. Connor called me a girl on the way out, he added, as if the insult belonged with facts. Con looked at the log times later. Mason Hargreaves, 1542 Art Corridor 1621, back door. No maintenance booked. The CCTV for the back gate was down for maintenance from 3:50 to 4:40. The IT guy shrugged. It glitches. We logged it. Who logged it? Khan asked. Caretaker, the IT guy said. Mason, good lad. Lisa brought screenshots and a time-stamped story of Connor, waving a black flip knife in a mirror 2 weeks back, saved by a not very close friend, and a frame where Mason drifted through behind him in a high Weiss he didn't own. It's nothing, she said, but it's a thread. Bryony used safeguarding to get the fob logs. Con used patience to get Mason's phone. The messages were what boys send when they haven't learned their words are weapons. You at gate. Come now lol. Done. Knife emoji. A corridor photo at 1622. Half pocket. A rucksack strap on a hook. Blue with a frayed pull. Jamie's bag. I moved them, Mason said when the strap was pointed out. Kids leave. I tidy. That's my job. His bravado leaked. Connor said, he said, like put something in, like a joke. He said teachers would stop with the pity if it was Miller. He said people would believe it. I didn't know anyone would. At the canal, I didn't. Where were you at? 4:30, Con asked. Here, Mason said, on the phone. Ask Garrison. Maybe true, maybe not. He shook like a man whose body had finally received the memo his mouth had been hiding. They brought Connor in from the football cage. He laughed until the tape turned, then said no comment, like a magic trick he'd learned without practicing. Con didn't push. The canal would wait. The towpath held prints, even when rain and memory swore it didn't. None of it exonerated Aiden. None of it pinned the worst thing on the worst boy. It only tugged a corner of a larger wrong. The gloves would be tested. The CCTV would stay down in the bit that mattered. The town would continue to choose the story that required the least new learning. They released Aiden after dark with a warning that sounded like a threat, because all warnings do in car parks. His mum cupped his face like she was counting what moved. He nodded in that way that means nothing and everything. I'm here. In the morning, he stood by the radiator, sleeves rolled, sketchbook open. Jamie raised a hand and lowered it, because sometimes eyes are bridges and sometimes they're tests. Aiden saved him. Hey, he said, as if they'd reached for the same pencil. Hey, Jamie said. You all right? Aiden asked, like the town hadn't turned and stared. Jamie thought, no, he said, but I'm here. Aiden smiled without using his mouth. Same. The corridor fussed around them. Connor looked nowhere, then everywhere, then nowhere again. The new caretaker walked past, smelling of bleach and apology. Miss Pratt told them to write about unreliable narrators. Jamie drew the space around his hand until the hand appeared and passed the sketch to Aiden under the book, like a secret that wasn't heavy enough to break. At lunch, a grape rolled into Aiden's hummus and he fished it out and put it back where fruit belonged. And the small normality of it made Jamie want to put his head down and breathe into his sleeves. After school, Jamie walked by the canal because the straight line of water could hold a day to account. The fence leaned at the spot where kids had leaned first. A swan drifted with ridiculous seriousness, then showed its ugly feet and became a bird again. He stood in the gap where the fence gave up and said Callum to the water without anyone asking him to. The name didn't change the air. That was the worst and only mercy. Footsteps, D.I. Khan. He nodded like men do when bread becomes news. They looked at the same piece of water. Did you help him? Jamie asked. Con thought and then said, he helped himself by telling the same story every time. Sometimes that's all it takes to survive us. Is he still a Jamie struggled with the word suspect? Words like that don't let go easily, Khan said. The sigh he kept in his nose came out quiet. But there are other words. Kid, friend. In the days that followed, the school sent an email about community, and someone peeled the killer poster down, and someone else wrote it on the back of a toilet door, because cruelty doesn't graduate. The gloves report came back with a maybe in it that people heard as yes or no, depending on whether they needed a villain to get to sleep. Mason learned the flavor of silence. Connor learned that kingship evaporates when there's no crowd. Aiden sat in art and drew a brick reflected in water so faithfully the reflection looked more real than the brick. Jamie wrote a reading log that was really about anger and called it Theme. He emptied his bag at night deliberately, one object at a time, naming each, turning the fabric inside out to feel the certainty of nothing hidden. He texted Aiden a picture of his bad hand drawing with worse map. Aidan replied with a photo of the negative space, forming a good hand and good space. They didn't say more. Sometimes language works by not being asked to do everything. On the canal path, flowers appeared and died and were replaced by soggy teddy bears that looked ashamed of being left. The news did a segment where a stranger cried for the camera and the camera cried back. Someone held a vigil with tea lights that made small warm circles the wind greedily ate. Teehee Town swallowed its own story and called it closure, and then went back to arguing about parking. A week later, the detectives called Aidan back to clarify. The word did the horrible trick of sounding gentle. He went. He sat in the beige hum. He answered the same questions again, and one new one that hadn't been ready in the first round. He came out paler than the wall and waved at Jamie across the road with 2 fingers held close together, then dropped his hand like it had gotten heavier since he lifted it. "Is it over?" Jamie asked him at the gates. Aidan considered his shoes. "They said no further action for now," he said, "and also not to leave town. Which is funny, because I wasn't going anywhere." Jamie wanted to say something you could use like a railing. He said, "Do you want the red pencil back you gave me in year 7? And Aidan laughed, the kind of laugh that doesn't reach your chest, and said, "Keep it. Yours draws better maps." On a grey Saturday, Jamie pressed his palm to his bedroom window and let it fog. With a finger he wrote tiny, "Aidan is okay," and watched the letters blur and fade when the warmth left, which was how truth behaved in a house like this, in a town like this. He didn't wipe the window. He let it clear on its own. He stood in the square of sun on the carpet, like in a doorway, and tried to feel chosen by nothing more mythical than light. Lisa stuck a post-it to the kettle. "Thank you," she didn't say for what. Dad made noodles because courage should have a flavor you recognize. The TV stayed off. The corner of the room where the news lived felt quieter when it wasn't being fed. At school, Miss Pratt set them to write about cause and effect. And Jamie wrote 3 pages about doors that shouldn't open and doors that do and who holds keys. And Miss Pratt put a small star next to a line that said sometimes we help the worst thing by convincing ourselves it isn't our job. And she didn't write a note in the margin because sometimes you don't put a child's good sentence in a cage. On the towpath, the fence still leaned. The water still reflected. The straight line still held. A boy who hadn't done the worst thing bore a shadow shaped like it. A friend who hadn't lied learned how to answer the same question without breaking. Jamie learned his hands looked like a map when he drew the space around them instead of the lines. He learned to check his bag with his fingers and not just his eyes. He learned that some words don't let go and some kindnesses are real even when they don't fix anything. He walked home the long way and counted tiles and thought, not in words, but in a feeling that felt like a sentence. That sometimes knowing the truth is the heaviest thing you're allowed to carry, and you carry it anyway, and you set it down carefully at night, where it won't roll onto anyone else. At the gate he found Aidan staring at his sketchbook like it had misbehaved. "Can I see?" Jamie asked. Aidan turned it around. The canal, the brick, the fence leaning, captured as if it had chosen to. "It looks more real than real," Jamie said. Aidan nodded once, slow. "I keep trying to draw the part no one believes," he said. "It keeps looking like a drawing." They stood together a minute without deciding to. The sky threatened rain and then changed its mind. Somewhere, a bell sounded like a door closing. Somewhere else, one opened and no one wrote down which. They went inside because the lesson began.